Hello and welcome to the In Publishing podcast. Our guest this week is Andrea Thompson, editor-in-chief of Marie Claire. We would like to thank our podcast sponsor, Acorn Web Offset, the Yorkshire-based specialist A5 and A4 magazine printer. With high-speed web offset and sheet-fed printing, together with in-house saddle stitching, perfect binding and mailing services, Acorn can cope with the most demanding of production turnarounds. Acorn prides itself on its efficiency and low-cost print production. For more information, visit acornweb.co.uk. Andrea Thompson is editor-in-chief of Marie Claire, the iconic women's magazine which went digital only last year. Andrea, welcome to the In Publishing podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, can we start by talking about your journey to where you are now? Did you always want to be a magazine journalist, and how did you set about becoming one?
Well, I always had an interest in other people's stories. I love talking to people and finding out, the unique thing about them. And that goes back to as long as I can remember. All my friends always said I was a very good listener. I find human beings just fascinating. So I thought, about doing something that might enable me to listen to people's stories, like being a psychologist. But journalism appealed to me because I've always had a real interest in politics and a sense of social justice. I came from a background and a household that was very political, and politics was talked at home a lot, and the idea of inequality and racial injustice. So I grew up sort of feeling that I wanted to amplify people's voices that you often didn't hear in the media. And so I think that that started very early on. I studied English literature at university, and then came out and worked in book publishing for a bit before moving into journalism.
And how did you make your first break into journalism?
I sent off about 100 work experience request letters to various brands within what is now Bauer building, and I managed to get some work experience on an old magazine that no longer exists called Look, and following that did some work experience at Elle and Red and Elle Deco, and really enjoyed the interior side of things, and ended up getting my first break at Ideal Home. And from there, I moved to Woman and Home, Glamour, and then the Daily Mail, where I think was the most sort of formative part of my career. I was there for just under 5 years, working as a senior features writer. And then moved over, did a bit of stuff in TV, and then joined Grazia before I came to Marie Claire. So I've kind of worked all over, really. But what I think holds all of those kind of roles together is, a strong interest in sort of ethical journalism, exposing wrongdoing. I worked as an undercover reporter for a while for the Daily Mail and Channel 4. And I really enjoyed exploring and exposing injustice. And that's why I think Marie Claire was a good fit for me. I'd worked at a few magazines in the past, but Marie Claire has always kind of stood for campaigning. It has a strong sense of campaigning and a real global outlook, which really appealed to me.
So what does it mean to be editor-in-chief? Can you talk us through your role and responsibilities?
Well, I suppose being editor-in-chief is like being a custodian of the brand. People know what Marie Claire stands for, and it's my job to uphold that. So, for me, it's about overseeing the content strategy across all the platforms, and commissioning content that sits around our core pillars, which are sustainability, empowerment, mental health, and education. And I work with my digital editor and the team to deliver that sort of very careful balance between, traffic-driven stories, and the kind of longer reads and features and campaigns that fit with Marie Claire's core DNA, to support the commercial success of the business. And when I talk about the sort of core DNA, it is that sort of campaigning element, that real genuine feminist agenda that Marie Claire has always had, which has, makes us slightly different from other brands out there.
And that really comes across on your website. I love the story you've got up at the moment about how women can stop men taking over in Zoom meetings, for example.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. um, so last year, Marie Claire closed its print edition. I mean, obviously, you will have seen the magazine industry go through massive changes over the last decade. But now you're digital only and you're thriving. What's that journey been like?
It's been a really exciting year and a really busy one, I have to say, actually. We've invested in events and, built up and strengthened our affiliate platforms and launched several campaigns as well. Digital covers were a part of that journey as well. We've done two, one with Neelam Gill, mental health activist and model, and also with Lily Cole, who's a real sustainability campaigner, both sort of really embodying that sort of Marie Claire campaigning spirit as well. And then we've also done a lot of events, even through lockdown. We started the year with the Hair Awards. We've had the beauty, our sort of flagship beauty awards the Skin Awards are coming up next week, and we're planning Future Shapers as well, which is our kind of core franchise, which celebrates career women, well, women that are doing brilliant things and giving back, and paving the path for other women. And I think it's been a strange year for all of us, obviously. Obviously, we've spent 6 months of our first year as a digital first in lockdown, but I think that's really played to our strengths. I think it must have been quite tricky working on a monthly during this time. It's been really, I've found it really liberating to work on a daily, and be able to be truly reactive to the news around COVID and lockdown. And we launched a campaign called In This Together during the first week of lockdown, and with a really strong focus on mental health, but also looking at the way that women's lives have been impacted because of COVID. Everything from sort of looking at the gender pay gap to inequality, and the gaps that have widened in lots of communities throughout lockdown. So I found it, a really exciting time to be digital first, because, as I say, we've just been able to be truly reactive to big movements like Black Lives Matter, and some of the news stories that have come out around inequality, and key workers related to COVID.
And those events, have you had to make them virtual or have you been able to hold any live events?
Well, we actually kicked off the year with our most successful sort of hair awards ever. That's an annual event, and that was
Mm.
really, that was brilliant. And that was in January, and that was our last live event. So this year we have done two virtual events, and we're about to host the third one, and we'll do a fourth one towards the end of the year, our Future Shapers. And it's been a real learning curve. I think I would never ever have imagined that we'd be able to do some of those key franchises virtually if you'd asked me back in January. But we've pulled off some really exciting events, as well as the usual stuff. I've appeared on a lot of panel discussions for COGX, for example, the leading digital festival earlier on this year, and various committees and panel discussions that have discussed diversity and inclusion in light of what's happened this year around the Black Lives Matter um, movement. So, there's been, I think everybody's had to adapt and pivot and look at offering their content and campaigns in a really novel way. And that's been really exciting.
And you've talked about making that shift from a monthly to a daily. How have you gone about making an impact as a digital-only brand? I know you've touched on some of the things like digital covers, but what are your main goals and priorities?
I mean, I think it's about sort of upholding what Marie Claire stood for 33 years, championing change and being, part of the difficult conversations and embodying a genuine feminist agenda and being sort of, I don't know, at the forefront of conversations around diversity and sustainability, but also bringing the messages of Marie Claire to a wider audience than ever. And that's kind of been the goal, as well as some of the brilliant commercial developments that we've made. So we've really scaled out our e-commerce activities this year, with massive development around our sister site, Marie Claire Edit. And that's kind of really about expanding our reach to even more partners and, offering more touch points for people, for the brand. And we've also launched our beauty sampling business, Marie Claire Beauty Drawer. And, in the first month, we've already had 22,000 subscribers. So I think it's about the goal is really about being able to offer our audience so many different touch points to purchase across the whole ecosystem of Marie Claire, and really focusing on that user engagement and growing out the big loyalty programs for our readerships. And that's what's really been different, from working on a print, because we've just been able to engage, and put that energy into engaging with women, in the palm of their hand, if you like, which is through their phone, which is where we all spend so much more of our time now. I mean, I love print, and I obviously did my training in print, but I found it fascinating, working on a digital first brand that is kind of putting all of the energy into where people are actually consuming their media, digitally and through their phones. So it's been a really great journey.
So, how are you going about building engagement with your readers? Are you considering subscriptions or membership offerings?
Well, we've recently launched the Marie Claire Beauty Drawer, which now has over 22,000 subscribers in less than 2 months, and which has been brilliant for us. And I think things like that are a really sort of new way to engage our loyal beauty audience, and offering sort of our readers the chance to sample products from brands that are editor approved. We've also expanded our fashion site, the Edit. And I think also, on a content level, in terms of the editorial, building engagement is about, with the readers, is really around kind of um, leading the conversation around those core values that Marie Claire has always stood for. So having an opinion, and a stance on some of the big topical issues that are happening today, and also driving, and campaigning for gender equality, which is and racial equality, which is really at the heart of what we stand for as a brand and always have done.
Is there anything about having a print edition that you miss?
Um, Not on a daily basis, no. I mean, I suppose, um, one of the things that I could say is, sometimes, something that I look back to with nostalgia, is that time to work on something, that, yeah, and really polish it so that it's, over a course of time, so that when it goes out, you've spent a lot of time working. Sorry, I've talked myself into a spot here. Sorry.
Yeah.
I don't really miss anything about print. I'm trying to say something positive.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. That's
um,
fine. Earlier this year, you wrote an editorial about casual racism and how it's necessary to change the structures of our institutions, including the media. What do you think needs to change in the media in general? And what are you doing at Marie Claire in particular to make this happen?
well, I think that, for a very long time, there's been a real absence of role models within management in the media. And certainly when I was entering the industry, um, there just weren't people that looked like me. And I had the sense that I had to, that there was a way that you had to be in a background that you had to be from to succeed. I think we've made some great strides since then with a lot more diversity at the helm of publications, but there's still so much work to be done when you look across at media teams within the UK. They are still predominantly um, a certain demographic. And I think that what it's about doing is looking at the way we recruit and casting the net a bit wider, doing outreach in schools, doing paid work experience initiatives that mean that you're not drawing from the same pool of talent that can afford to work for free, which has always been the way in the past, or for very low wages, which means you're not often getting the most diverse range of talent. And it's also about recognizing within our organisations that there is a problem and that it needs to be tackled. And certainly at Marie Claire, we we've tried very consistently to draw talent from a range of backgrounds. Personally, I do mentoring, and I've always been very keen to mentor young women who are from socially and economically deprived backgrounds who might not have considered a career in the media industry. So I think that it's about looking at some of the learnings this year and putting in place systematic changes within our companies that ensure that we can pull in and retain staff who are from different backgrounds.
And you mentioned there that when you started out, you didn't see that many people who looked like you working in the media. What has been your own experience of working in the media as a mixed race woman?
I mean, my experience has been, you know, generally a positive one. I've had a brilliant career and worked at a range of different publications, but I have experienced casual racism throughout my career, and the sort of comments that can make you feel, even when you get to a certain point on the ladder, like an outsider, like you shouldn't really be there. And that's really damaging for anybody's confidence. And, it happens less now that I'm in a senior position, but it's still really disheartening to see and hear comments that and generalizations about um, black people, for example, and people from different backgrounds that can casually be said in conversations, whether it's about looks or about presumptions made about education and background based on the color of somebody's skin. And I think that's still a big problem in our industry. And it's something that I've experienced firsthand, and that, has happened up until very recently.
You were recently appointed to the British Society of Magazine Editors Committee. What will that involve and what do you hope to achieve?
Well, I'm really excited to have been invited onto the BSME committee. I mean, the first thing that I'm going to be tasked with is being a judge on the annual journalism awards. But in the long term, I'm really looking forward to being part of the education initiatives that they've implemented, which is all about providing opportunities to people from socially and economically disadvantaged areas to break into journalism. And I think that's really important, because the future of magazines, and when I say magazines, I'm not just talking about print magazines, like digital media that's in a magazine format.
Yeah.
The future of that is very much, I think, about being appealing to what the widest possible audience. And that means, having subject matter and voices that reflect society, so that people carry on buying magazine products. And I really care about the future of magazines, and so I'm really looking forward to being involved in helping that happen.
And Marie Claire, you've just produced a major report on the future of work. Obviously, all of our working lives have changed massively over the last year. How have the working patterns of you and your staff changed as a result of COVID? And was that part of the thinking behind this report?
Yes, well, since the first week of lockdown, we as a Marie Claire team have been working from home, and I'm throughout the whole of the lockdown period, we've explored different themes around working from home and mental health, and so it was really interesting to work with a huge global partner like LinkedIn to look at the patterns around working from home and how it's impacted people over the last 6 months. And what we actually found in the survey was that almost 2/3 of people actually never want to go back to the 9 to 5. And that really rings true with what we've seen within my own team. We've worked brilliantly remotely since March, and being on a fast-paced a digital publication like Marie Claire, people have sort of just focused on getting the very, very best daily content out. And it to me, it doesn't really matter whether people would be in the office or at home. It's worked so well, just sort of having meeting up on remotely, and people working at home, that I don't see us going back to a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday model. And I don't think it's that beneficial. I think people have worked really well during the period. And, we're seeing, the acceleration of perhaps a pattern that had started way before lockdown, but that is actually really inevitable, and it's better in a lot of ways for women, and it means that we can that people from outside London who have that huge commute, um, you know, don't have to do that on a daily basis. So it was a really interesting report to be a part of, and to see how the trends that we've seen on the team are reflected in the rest of the country.
And do you think that going forward there would still be some sort of physical element? Do you think you'll still have some meetings in person? I mean, you've talked about how well the online meetings worked, but I suppose people often think about magazines as a sort of creative hub. And do you think that you'll retain some of that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm not saying that we would not go back to the office, but I don't see the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday model being something that we'd do anymore. I'd see sort of 3 days in the office and 2 days from home following, when all of this is over,
Yes. Yeah.
being normality, because you cannot replace that that creative um, process of brainstorming together as a team, and also just the general back and forth kind of ideas generation that happens within an office environment. I think that's something that we are missing. What happens on Zoom calls is that often it formalizes a
Yeah.
meeting, and actually it's really nice to just walk up to somebody at their desk and say, "Hey, what do you think of this?" And have a bit more of a casual conversation. And that's something that I think we are missing, and we're looking forward to doing. So
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, I
definitely.
definitely think that we'll resume that. And in fact, just before Boris's announcement, we were due to go back at
Right.
the beginning of September, but it's been put on hold now. So I look forward to going back, at some point. But I don't see it being sort of the full week as it was in the past.
Yeah, sure. So, what's in the pipeline over the next few months for Marie Claire and your team?
Well, in the lead up to Christmas, there's going to be a big focus for us on affiliates, and most of the team at the moment are working on um, Prime Day and Black Friday and Cyber Monday, some of the key shopping events before Christmas. We also have our annual Future Shapers uh, ceremony and awards, which will be obviously virtual this year. And next week we have our first ever Skin Awards, which is a celebration of all things skin, a month of activity on the website, but also presenting the best products out there with an award on behalf of Marie Claire. So I'm really looking forward to that. So lots going on for the next few months.
Fantastic. And finally, outside of work, what do you do to relax?
I've always been a keen runner. I started running at school, and I did competitive running, and have always um, used it as a way to switch off, but also just to it's something that makes me really, really happy. So through lockdown, particularly starting the day or ending the day with a run has been a complete lifesaver for me. And I find that that's really, my go-to thing to switch off, as well, of course, as hanging out with my family. Kids are brilliant for helping you to live in the present. So I think that's a really key thing to relaxation as well, although quite tiring at times.
Yeah, definitely. Brilliant. Well, Andrea Thompson, thank you so much for being our guest on the In Publishing podcast.
Thank you.
A big thank you again to Acorn Web Offset for sponsoring this podcast. If you're looking for a new magazine printer, then check out their website at acornweb.co.uk or contact Matt Carey on 07714 299 105 or by email at matthew.carey@acornweb.co.uk. Thank you to Andrea for being our guest this week. Andrea can be found on Instagram and Twitter. Her handle for both sites is @AndreaCanWrite. You can check out Marie Claire at www.marieclaire.co.uk. If you would like to get in touch with us, then our email address is editorial@inpublishing.co.uk. Thank you for listening, and please join me next week on the In Publishing podcast.